Welcome back to this Pokemon Scarlet surprise trade crochet badge quest, where I'm surprise trading a Pokemon before each gym, Titan and Team Star Base, and then crocheting the Pokemon we receive each time. I hope you enjoyed that cold open, catching you up on the story so far. We left it last episode by catching an Armarouge for trade, and the Pokemon we receive in exchange is... And the Pokemon we receive in exchange is... Charcadet, the Fire Child Pokemon. It's said that this Pokemon was a burnt piece of charcoal that came to life. We've seen Charcadet show up recently. Charlos the Charcadet had a part to play in our takedown of Mela back in episode 8. The Pokemon Company also released a Charcadet short not long ago, so this Pokemon is really enjoying their time in the limelight. Let's move over and have a look at our Charcadet though. Level 13 with a neutral nature. Nothing much to glean from this other than that it was maybe caught with the intention to be traded away. As in most of our episodes, we will have to train him up before we can take on a challenge, but we will also be evolving him. Charcadet has a really interesting way of evolving. It's a split evolution, like we've seen with Applin and Curlier, but this one uses version exclusive items. When fighting or catching Pokemon, you can pick up materials from them after battle. These can also sometimes be found on the ground. In Zapapico, there is a man or woman, depending on your version of the game, that will trade materials for a set of armour. In Violet, you would need 10 Sinistea chips to acquire the Malicious armour, allowing your Charcadet to evolve into the Fire Ghost Ceruledge. We're playing Scarlet though, and so we'll need 10 Bronzor fragments to give us the Auspicious armour that will evolve our Charcadet into the Fire Psychic Armarouge. Before we get going, I'll break down Charcadet's design for Crochet. Charcadet has a big head, absolutely huge head.
Look at the size of that boy's head. Shh. I'm not kidding, it's like an orange on a toothpick.
There are a few colour changes on the base of the head itself. A black circular face that switches to an orange spiked pattern and then to red at the back. He has a poof of flame atop his big melon that also has a few colour changes. The line's most notable feature for me is the faceplate that sits on their forehead. It's an odd shape, like a quarter of a bowling ball, complete with finger holes. The eyes are slightly covered by it, but flames burst from them, overlapping the helmet. Charcadet's body is relatively small compared to its massive head. It has a jagged blazer for a torso. It juts out at angles, and the shoulder and hips are shaped like flames. In the centre of his chest is an orange shape. I don't quite know how to describe it, but it looks a little like a spade to me. This colour also runs down the centre of the back where a flame erupts out. Its arms end suddenly with a rounded stump. The colour change makes it appear to be wearing gloves. They have no fingers, just a thumb on each hand. The legs are similar. Black runs down from butt to shins and then changes to maroon and red to look like boots. This is a simple design with incredibly complicated shapes. Even something as simple as the head has me a little unsure how to proceed with the colour change patterns. The colours I'll be using are black for the face, a deep yellow for the head and chest pieces, red for the bulk of the project, and maroon for the accents. Then I have a slightly lighter black for the faceplate, and a pink and blue for the head flame. I feel like I have to start with the gargantuan head. I thought of a few different ways to do it. Maybe a base red ball and then add the patterns separately on top? I felt like those would lead to the head being lumpy or uneven, as I'd have to stitch those on. I went with starting at the front of the face with the black. I make a circle and then add these semicircles on the side on the front loops only. Then I'll switch to yellow and continue around for a bit. My thinking was just to crochet the yellow as a circle, and then I could embroider on the triangular pattern later. I think this was a mistake in hindsight, but I didn't realise it at the time. I finish up the head with red and stuff this Boston Swede with tons of filling. I then embroider on the triangles as I mentioned earlier, but I think they look wrong. Something I very rarely do is test out a pattern before I commit to it. I'm very much a first draft, last draft kind of person, but the bowling ball helmet had me puzzled. I made this smaller version of it to test out a solution. I think I could get the angles around the eyes as well as the concave pieces at the top all in one piece. So I got started on a bigger scale version. The blacks I've used are extremely similar in shade to each other, so I would suggest trying to find a dark grey if you were to make your own. Not like I'm releasing a pattern for this one, it was so complicated that my notes are a mess. After making the front circle, or hexagon more like, I work around just a section of the mask that will sit over the eyes. It fits on the humongous coconut alright, so I can continue with the edges and colour changes. The red concaves become bigger and bigger with each round. I increase these so that they will eventually be able to flatten against each other. Then finally at the back of the mask, I switch to maroon to finish it off. I crochet some pieces to cover the gaps around the sides, pop some stuffing into it and stitch it to the face. The last crocheted piece to go on the head is the flame, which I start in blue before switching to pink. It doesn't look very appropriate right now, so let's skip ahead to the red colour change. I increase and decrease to make them appear lumpy. Time for Who's That Pokemon? I posted this image on social media and Slurms007 got it correct again. Perhaps it was too easy. No one, however, found Charcadet chilling at a pizza last episode during Gardevoir's Arceus-like future vision scene. Can you spot the next Pokemon in this episode? I make the torso next in red. Rather than doing all the colour changes for this one, I just make the base and will add the extra flourishes on afterwards. I add these triangles to the base of the red to act as the bottom of Charcadet's blazer, and then switch to black to finish the butt. I make the shoulder pads in kind of a teardrop shape. The flames on the hips will be a similar shape. I crochet a short neck in yellow and then work down the back to make the oval pattern. This is a similar technique to how I made Gardevoir's chest last time. I couldn't figure out a way to do the pointed chest shape within the same piece, so I decided to do it separately. I make a very wise cone and then add some offshoots. From the front it looks like a top-down view of a turtle. I squish it and stuff it and then add it to the body. In an unusual turn, I actually left something simple for near the end. The legs are just cylinders, starting with the red circle, switching to maroon for a minute, and then completing the rest of the leg in black. They get slimmer as I reach the waist, so I decrease accordingly. The arms are almost exactly the same, but I make a small thumb first and then add it to the round so it all joins up, and I can make the rest of the arm with the colour changes. Finally, the back flame. I did have to leave something slightly complicated for the very end in true fashion. The flame is quite slim, but it has a lot of twists and turns, so I wasn't sure if I could do it in one single round. I decided to go with making it as two separate flat pieces that I can then stitch together and stuff. I add the finger holes onto the bowling ball, although they're not super visible, as well as the eyes in felt, and Charcadet is all done. Let's hunt some Bronzor. Bronzor can usually be found around ruins in the Paldea region, so I headed to the ones west of Los Platos to tackle a few and pick up their fragmented bodies. I thought Charcadet would be fine to take this on himself, being a fire type versus a steel type, but he just didn't have the levels or power to reliably do it. It became a team effort to find the fragments needed, even allowing Shelgon to gain some EXP. We'll have a Salamence someday. While I'm training, I also thought I should catch one of these Bronzor to offer up to trade next episode. It felt right to honour this Pokemon I'm hunting for parts. When I have my 10 fragments, I fly over to Zapapico and track down the armour trader. He gives me my auspicious armour, and I evolve Charcadet into the fire warrior Pokemon Armarouge. Just looking at this design fills me with dread, knowing I will have to crochet these odd shapes. Armarouge gets an upgrade to some of his moves, but it still needs a couple more levels before heading off for today's challenge. Speaking of which, I decided that the most sensible option would be the lurking Steel Titan Orthworm. It's a steel type, so we have some super effective damage, and I don't believe it knows any ground moves, so we shouldn't be too worried. I took a look at Armarouge's learn set and thought I'd aim for level 32 when I can get Lava Plume before tackling a Titan. Armarouge actually has a signature move, Armor Cannon, but it doesn't learn this until level 62. It works similarly to close combat, hitting hard but lowering the user's defences. Maybe he'll have this move by the end of the quest. So I go back to the Bronzor. I deplete their population like Thanos landing on a new planet, and eventually leave in search of higher leveled prey. Luckily, the quarry just near Orthworm is full of fighting and steel types, perfect for the fire psychic Armarouge. Watch out for the Dug Trio here, as they can have Arena Trap, forcing you to battle them. I also move back into the familiar Tagtree Thicket, filled with bugs and poison types. Before too long, Armarouge reaches level 32 and learns Lava Plume. With all this, it's time to break down Armarouge's design for Crochet. Where do I even begin? Armarouge has grown into its head. It's similarly patterned to Charcadet's with the black face, yellow triangles and red base, but it has a point for a chin. Two antennae spring out of the sides of the head, just underneath Armarouge's bowling ball headpiece. It's kinda slimmer than Charcadet's, probably due to the skinnier face, and it features small yellow finger holes this time. Armarouge's head flame is now bigger and looks like a Roman centurion's crest. We can see that Armarouge's body underneath the armour is red, and it has similar arms and legs to Charcadet. The hands are more mitten-like and less rounded, and the legs are very long. approximately half of Armarouge's height. Now for the yellow armour. I'll break it down into pieces. A thick collar sits around the neck. It cups the top of the arms, leaving Armarouge's armpits exposed. The back of this collar is like a hood. It's thick and points downward with 3 red pips adorned on it, not unlike the ones on the headpiece. The front plate of the armour covers the front of Armarouge's neck and incorporates some of the red colour as it works down the body, ending in a tail of sorts. Pieces of red flash underneath this cuirass, but I'm unsure if this is also part of the armour or if it's exposed flesh. A piece of armour, I believe called a fold, covers Armarouge's butt in a 3-triangled pattern. Flipping Armarouge upside down, courtesy of the Pokemon Home app, we can see that he wears yellow underwear, protecting the important bits. Finally, Armarouge's signature pauldrons float over his arms. They're round in shape with ridges and half pipes on each end. These pauldrons come together when Armarouge attacks, forming a cannon. The colours for Armarouge are the same as Charcadet's, but I'll be using a light yellow for the armour. I begin with the crimson chin. Unlike Charcadet, I will be adding the features on separately, so I make the chin pointy and then round off to finish the head. It's just slightly smaller than Charcadet's. I mean, nothing could really be bigger.
He'll be crying himself to sleep tonight on his huge pillow.
I make a wide triangle in black for the face and pin that to the head. For the antenna, I make some slim cones in yellow that change to red and also pin those to the head. Now accustomed to making the quarter bowling ball, I make the same shape for Armarouge. I alter it slightly to fit the different shaped head, but it mostly just stays the same pattern. For the yellow triangled pattern, I do just that. I make 3 triangles along a row like bunting. Everything is pinned down to look at measurements and placement before I make the black triangles at the back. This pattern has multiple triangles facing downwards to the neck and one upwards to the flame. It's pretty much the same as the yellow ones I've made, but I also work the other side of the chain to make the lone point too. Now I can stitch everything on the head together. My options for the body were to just make everything as a whole and fill it, meaning the armour would be both the inner and outer layer, or I could make a body and fill it, and then craft the armour to put on top like he'd actually be wearing it. I went with the second option as I could then make the armour in many different pieces rather than just a few. It would also give me a base for placement when I stitch everything together. So I make the body in red, or at least the chest and neck. I thought I would do the bottom separately with the legs, but I ended up going a different direction anyway, and this could have all just been one piece. With the chest made, I make the arms next. Armarouge's colour changes on his arms are not as simple as Charcadet's, and instead cover the back of the hand and encircle the thumbs. So I gradually change the colour to leave that area for the thumbs and work almost up to the elbow in maroon. Finishing the rest in black and making the biceps much slimmer than the forearms. Now for the legs, again almost the same as Charcadet's. The colour changes for the legs are pointed. I work up to the knee in red before changing to maroon, and then finally black again. I think it was at this point that I realised Armarouge was going to be absolutely massive, my biggest crochet project to date. I think I miscalculated when I initially made the head, and so everything else had to be to scale with that. I am kind of glad I did make it so large though, as it did give me the size needed to work more detail into the armour. At a smaller size, I'd have to skip certain bits as I wouldn't have the stitch count available to me. For the bottom of Armarouge's body, I make a jug-like shape in yellow. This will be the yellow underwear we saw earlier, with the rest covered by armour. I fill this and attach it to the chest. As you can now see, this could have all been one piece, but I didn't realise it at the time. Time to make the armour, the part I've been dreading ever since this Pokemon arrived in the trades. I start at the top with the collar. I think that if I make it flat with rows, I can fold it into shape well enough. So I make my rows and then work the back loops only to give it a ridge where it can fold easily. I make some increases as I go, as the collar would be wider on the outside than it is on the inside. Once I have this shaped out, I add the spolders that would cover the upper arm and then the hood-like piece on the back. For the front of the collar, I just make a small rectangle with the same back loops only folds. I wasn't sure on how to make the unusual shape for the front piece, so I split it in half. I make one trapezoid and then another. I can then stitch both of them together, and it won't matter about the seam as Armarouge's armour is convex anyway. I pin it to the chest to see how it sizes up. So far so good. The bottom of that front section is the same idea, split it into two. I tried my best to work with different angles, adding in the pieces that stick out and the points. I think it came out okay, and so make a second one and stitch them together as before. Finally, for this section, I make a V in red as well as some small red pieces to be placed underneath the armour. I pop a bit of stuffing in there and stitch everything to the body. I think out of anything in this project, the pauldrons are the thing I'm least happy with. I didn't really want to think about how to make them float above the arms just yet. I was having real trouble with the off pattern. It's not quite a half sphere, and there's nothing to stuff it with to help it keep its shape. I ended up going with a circular pattern and then crafted some rectangles on opposing ends so that it would be half pipe shaped when folded. I weaved in some wire around the edges in the hopes that it could keep the shape better. Perhaps I could use the same wire to give the floating effect too. The folds are simple enough to do. I make a trapezoid-like shape and work in the back loops to give it the foldability again. Then I work 3 triangles at the base. This is stitched to the butt. Armour complete, I begin the final piece, the flame crest. With all the points and flames that jut out of this piece, I thought it best to work on one central shape and then add those small pieces on later. So I start at the front in red, increasing and decreasing to give it a look of movement. I had to concentrate on my colour changes here, so I skipped filming this part. The finished piece has the yellow and pink changes and ends in a zigzag point. I make some small cones as well as a collar of sorts that sprouts from the head to the flame. I also make the thumbs that I forgot to add earlier.
Bread.
I add on the eyes in felt and embroider the markings on the helmet and hood. Stitching everything together means that this painfully long project is over and we can fight some worms. We get to the quarry at night and see our quarry poking his head out of the ground. Chasing him down, we finally corner the Titan and he attacks. Okay, we're ready. Let's unleash a lava plume. Oh, and we one-shot. Maybe I overleveled for this. Never mind, we continue the hunt and find the big worm chowing down on some herba. This time we're joined by Arvin for the battle, but somehow I don't think we'll need his help. I terrestrialise Armarouge into a pure fire type, boosting our already powerful lava plume. We unleash the power of a volcano on Orthworm, and also on Arvin's Toadscall. Sorry man. But Orthworm survives. Finally a real fight. He crits us with a headbutt, and then I refry these beans with a second lava plume. That was very anticlimactic, and I'm really sorry about that, but I guess it's nice not to have to struggle for a challenge for once. We follow Arvin into the cave, where we find some salty herba mystica. Arvin sprinkles it over some sandwiches, and it's time to eat. This gives Koraidon the ability to jump higher, but unfortunately it doesn't have much of an effect on Mabostiff. His health doesn't improve, but he doesn't get worse, so Arvin still remains optimistic. I'd normally end the episode by catching a Pokemon for trade, but we already have our Bronzor ready to go, so I will see you next time.